Hi, my name is Deb Kennedy. I'm the Financial Aid Officer at the Faculty of Law at UVic. And here's my contact information. Today I will be giving a short tutorial to introduce you to our bursary process and the different funds that are available to our students. The first thing that you need to know is that there are two different financial aid offices that you will be dealing with at UVic as a law student. And the first one is my office, and I deal with some things, with a limited number of things. But the other office is Student Awards and Financial Aid, and they are located in the University Center. And I will speak more to that in a little bit and what the differences are. There's a variety of student aid or financial aid that's offered to UVic law students. And as you can see, the list is quite lengthy, and some will apply to most students and other parts are quite specific. The first part of financial aid that we offer to, or that is offered to UVic law students, that the law school doesn't actually offer, are student loans and grants, and those are typically provincially provided. So for example, if you're from British Columbia, you would apply through Student Aid BC. And different provinces do give different amounts of student loans and grants. Scholarships. The university does offer scholarships. You are automatically entered for those, entered in the running for those when you apply to law school and are accepted. Bursaries. There are two kinds of bursaries. There are bursaries given by the Faculty of Law, and there are bursaries given by the university itself, just the general university. There are a series of private scholarships, awards, and bursaries. I will from time to time email scholarships, awards, and bursaries to you that I hear of that you may apply to get. If you see any, please let us know, and it is a good idea to go out and look for these yourself. Contributions from Indigenous bands, employers, or community groups are quite common. And then we have a variety of funds within the Faculty of Law that are offered to some of our students. We have some emergency loan funding for extraordinary situations, and then we have something called the Diversity Access Grant, which is for extraordinary expenditures for very specific groups of students. For student loans, you must apply again through your provincial student loan provider. If you have any questions regarding student loans that you cannot get answered through the student loan provider itself, please contact Student Awards and Financial Aid. And here's their contact information. I don't actually deal with the student loans themselves. I will be happy to point you in the right direction, so you can always use me as a point of contact, but more than likely I will direct you directly to SAFA, or Student Awards and Financial Aid. And as I mentioned earlier, when you're accepted to the Faculty of Law, you're automatically considered for one of many scholarships that the Faculty of Law offers. And they're given out mostly to top applicants and students. We get a lot of questions from students about how to apply for scholarships. And this is really the answer. You don't need to apply for them unless they're private. The Diversity Access Grant that I mentioned earlier is it's money given to us by the Law Foundation to promote more equitable access to legal education and alleviate economic disadvantage. The grants are awarded to help meet extraordinary needs or expenses of law students who are in financial need. In particular, students with physical, mental, or learning disabilities, Indigenous students, students with family care responsibilities, and students from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background. There's a list of examples of eligible expenses that are included in the Diversity Access Grant. I don't feel like I need to read these out loud. You can go through them, but they're not limited to those. We do consider a variety of expenses. This is a grant that you must apply for actively, so you would need to come talk to me in order to apply for this. And if you are approved, you're reimbursed upon providing a receipt to us. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the Faculty of Law bursary process. If you're asking yourself what a bursary is, it is a non-repayable grant designed to ensure that students who qualify for legal education will not be denied access due to their financial circumstances. A bursary is generally seen as a last resort for funding for students, philosophically. So we do ask that students consider their other financial resources as well. We do ask that students, when they apply for bursaries, also apply for provincial student loan funding and any other eligible funds that they can find. There are 2 bursary pools that are available to students registered in the JD or the JID program. There's the Faculty of Law bursary fund, and we have our own. And the university has a general fund that's administered by SAFA, or Student Awards and Financial Aid. In order to be eligible for the Faculty of Law bursary, you must apply for both the Faculty of Law bursary and the general UVic bursary. You can, however, apply for only the general bursary and not the Faculty of Law bursary. I will warn you, however, that this can raise some questions if you only apply for the general bursary and not the Faculty of Law bursary. So just keep that in mind. It's a good idea to apply for both. Besides, that will maximize the amount of dollars that you're eligible for. The Faculty of Law bursary is decided in September. However, because of the general bursary due date, they're not awarded until October. But the general bursary fund is dispersed in January between the add drop date and the tuition due date. So this is another good reason to apply for both funds. Our bursary is dispersed the first term, and the general UVic bursary is dispersed during the second term. And as we mentioned before, there are also private bursaries, scholarships, and awards that are available throughout the year from a variety of sources. Again, we encourage you to look for these, and we do encourage you to share them with us when you do find them. So, in order to offset the expense of tuition, the law faculty awards approximately $350,000 in bursaries to both our incoming and current students. And every year, law students receive a similar amount from the general university's bursary fund. Between the 2 bursaries, we're usually able to meet nearly 100% of students' financial need as we calculate it. And the bursaries are determined based on an individual analysis of financial need. They are not a replacement for student loans or savings. Information about the bursary application process for both the Faculty of Law and the General University is distributed through the incoming student listserv. Application instructions will be sent through the listserv. And I know particularly as incoming students, you receive a lot of emails. It is a really good idea to read through these to make sure that you're not missing anything, because if you ignore them, you will miss some pretty critical information. The bursary of the Faculty of Law bursary deadline happens twice a year. The summer deadline is in May and is May 1st, and our decisions are made in late May. The fall winter deadline is June 30th, and decisions are made in early September. The general bursary deadline also happens twice a year. Their deadlines are later than ours. The summer deadline is June 1st with decisions made in late July, and the fall and winter deadline is October 15th with decisions made by the end of December. So as you can see, we can't disperse our fall and winter bursaries until after the deadline for the general bursaries has passed. The reason being that you need to apply for both of them in order to be eligible for our bursary. And the same is true for the summer. So before you apply, here are a few things to keep in mind. The first thing, of course, is that you need to apply for provincial financial aid. Bursaries will not be processed for students who do not make use of their available financial aid. We do make exceptions from time to time for students who are not eligible for provincial financial aid. And if you're one of those students, please come see us and talk to us, and we'll talk through that situation with you. The second thing is to make note of all of your due dates. They are not flexible. I would advise that you put them in your calendar early and remind yourself ahead of time to complete these applications. They're not lengthy and they're not difficult, but law school can be an overwhelming experience, particularly when you first start. So it's a good idea to just get everything done as early as you can. Collect your documentation. Most students will need to provide to my office the student loan notice of assessment, their tax assessment, your GST refund statement, and a typical pay stub from your summer employment. If you own assets like real property or have accounts like RSPs, you'll need statements corroborating your equity or savings. And the documentation for SAFA will be slightly different, so it's a good idea to check in with their office to see what kind of documentation they require. And if you're having a tough time with and you have any questions or you're having a difficult time collecting your documentation, please email me or stop by my office. There is a lot that we can resolve through communication, but the majority of students who don't qualify for bursaries do not do so because they didn't provide documentation, or they didn't complete the process, or they didn't follow through with applying for the general UVic bursary. As you're applying, you need to remember just a few things. Please try and collect all of your documentation prior to filling out the application. If you need to change or update information on the application, please just email me. This happens all the time. There's a long period of time between the time that the application is due and when the decision is made. So if you have something happen, please, by all means, just drop us a line. Remember to make ethical choices. It is important to note on your application contributions from your family, band, law firm, employer, or any other source. And it is quite common, particularly with third-year students, to have had a contribution from their employer for their third year of law school. If you have extenuating circumstances for which the rules should not apply as they do to others, please make sure and note it on the application or just send us an email. And this is really important because we do make exceptions. This doesn't mean that we will make an exception for you, but we do make some exceptions. The last important thing to remember is to redact sensitive information. Information that we will never need or ask for are things like your SIN number or your bank account information. Because you frequently scan documents to us, we then have a digital record of that. So it's important to just black it out or otherwise redact before you send it over. So the awards are not competitively given. As much as we'd love to know how much community service you've done or how involved you are in the community, that will not make you more or less eligible for a bursary. It is a mathematical calculation of your financial need. Because the bursaries are considered a last resort for students, students are expected to maximize their resources. This is measured against an objective criteria, taking into account the funding available from a variety of sources as well as individual circumstances. So we do take into account things like your savings, how much money you made in your employment, your vehicle, and whether or not you have equity in a home. One thing we get asked about, though, is student lines of credit. Student line of credit will not affect the calculation of whether or not you get a bursary. Once all students have had their unmet need calculated, this is totaled and called the global need. The global need is then compared to the bursary budget available. Then the percentage of the global need that the Faculty of Law is able to meet is calculated. So for example, if the global need is $400,000 and the available budget is $350,000, we may choose to meet 80% of the global need, which would leave some room to meet appeals and students whose needs drastically change. In the past, we've met between 70 and 100% of the global need for students. Students are then matched up with named bursaries whose criteria they match. Please note that frequently the criteria for named bursaries will be broad. The bursary may name a desired group to receive the money. For example, the money goes to a student with green eyes, but it may name this only as a preference. For example, preference is given to a student with green eyes. In this case, if there are no qualified students who meet the criteria, we can give this award to someone who does not. We get a lot of questions from students who are confused about why they received a bursary. Our main goal is to spend the money that we have available, but we have to do it within the criteria that we have. So sometimes this preferential, the preferential criteria cannot be met, and we just need to give the money to a student if we can. You are able to opt out of receiving named bursaries. So in that case, the money is given to you from the Faculty of Law Access Bursary, which is affectionately known as FLAB. And if you receive a bursary, we do ask that you thank the donor, and instructions are sent on a way to do that. Okay, how is individual unmet need calculated? The information from each application is put into a worksheet for each student that applies objective information along with individual circumstances to weigh each individual's need against that individual's resources. If your need is greater than your resources, then you have individual unmet need. It's really that simple. So need includes the following: tuition and fees, and this is the same for most students. Books and supplies, and this includes a fund for a laptop that's amortized over 3 years. Cost of living expense allowance, which does depend on your individual living circumstances and dependents. So for example, your cost of living allowance will be much lower if you live with your parents than if you live on your own, and it will be much lower if you're single and don't have any dependents than if you have a partner and 3 children. And it is based on the Student ABC standard of living for moderate living. And we've added a little bit to that to account for the rising cost of rent in Victoria. Expenses for family obligations such as child support, childcare, travel expenses, and in some cases, partner tuition. We also allow a one-time moving expense. Co-op fees paid during that academic year are considered in your need, and other allowable expenses. This is vague on purpose. So if you have other expenses that you believe should be allowed in the calculation of your need, please bring them to us and we can discuss that. Typically this has been used for things like medical expenses that are not covered by insurance for students who do not qualify for the Diversity Access Grant. So when we consider resources, we include the following. The first thing we do is we do a summer savings calculation, which tells us how much money you should have saved objectively over the summer with your job. So we do this, we take your net income for the summer and we multiply it by the number of weeks that you've worked, and we subtract out the cost of living for that time, and then you are expected to save 75 cents of every dollar beyond that. If you choose not to work or take 3 academic terms in a row, we apply what's called the lost resource allocation, which is a penalty because we do consider that students should be contributing to their own education when given the chance. We consider other sources of funding. We consider your partner's income for the academic calendar year, government child care subsidy or child support payments, and student loan funding. And as I've said before, student loan funding is more generous in some provinces than others, so this can really make a difference. So if, for example, you're from Alberta, Alberta gives a much more generous student loan and grant than BC does, or really any other province does, and that can make a big difference for students. We include in your resources assets, like vehicles. And you are given a $10,000 allowance for the value of your vehicle, but we don't consider that you need a car typically. Most students live on the bus route, and we like to encourage commuting by other means besides a car. If you own a car that is worth more than $10,000 and do not have an exceptional need for it, we will consider that in your resources and amortize it over the life of your law school career. So we will only count it against you once. In your resources, we also consider scholarships, awards, and contributions from family, community, band, or employer. And then we consider other money that you have access to. Social assistance and other reported resources. GST rebate, tax refund, and then savings. We consider equity in a home, things like that. However, I would encourage all students who feel like they might benefit from a bursary to go ahead and apply, even if you feel like you may not qualify. So we get a lot of questions after the bursaries are calculated about why students didn't get bursaries, of course. The first reason most students don't get bursaries is they didn't meet the deadline. They didn't turn in all their documentation. They didn't follow the rules. They didn't apply for the general bursary. So that is really something to pay attention to. Students who have very significant assets will not be eligible for bursaries. And I will note here that if you have equity in a home and you are not eligible for a student line of credit, that is something that you should talk to us about, because then we will not consider the equity in your home. The reason we consider equity in a home is that students who have equity in a home tend to have more options available to them for borrowing, etc. We don't think that you need to sell your home to go to law school, but you would have more options available to you to borrow money. So again, if you're not eligible for a student line of credit and you could bring us documentation to that effect, then that would be helpful to you. Did you work over the summer or earn a very high income before starting law school? Students who have very high paying jobs, of course, will be eligible for a smaller bursary than those who have low paying jobs. And if you didn't work over the summer or before starting law school, or you took a significant number of academic terms in a row, you will get a penalty. Did you receive significant contributions or scholarships? How generous was your student financial aid? And again, students from Alberta can sometimes not qualify for bursaries because their student aid funding is much more generous than the student aid funding from different provinces. I do, however, encourage you to go ahead and still apply for a bursary, because again, it's an easy form, and I don't really like the process of students selecting themselves out because you might actually surprise yourself and be eligible. Did your living situation affect your eligibility? And again, the cost of living allowance is lower for students who live with their parents, which may be a good choice for other reasons, than for students who live on their own. Are you enrolled in only one term? So if you're enrolled in only one term, the calculation is obviously different. So the tuition and the cost of living allowance, etc., are half, essentially. So this will tend to be less. And then of course, if you took 3 academic terms in a row or more. So what if my circumstances change? If your circumstances change over the course of the year, you're obligated to tell us. If it's necessary, we will reassess your bursary eligibility. The most common circumstance that affects bursaries is co-op. So if you think there's a possibility that you will be only enrolled in the fall term, that you'll be doing a winter or spring co-op, it may be best just to apply for the fall bursary. You can always apply for the winter bursary later, and we can adjust it. It's just really uncomfortable when you apply for both terms and then you decide later to take a co-op term in the winter term. And then frequently we have to claw back some of that money, and that can be really uncomfortable for students. And because we give students bursaries early in the year, we do have changes of circumstances sometimes, and that can mean that we need to take back some bursary money. So it's a wise idea not to go and spend all your bursary money right away.
There you go. There you go. Thank you, sir. There you go. Thank you, sir. There you go. Thank you, sir. There you go.
Okay. The best way to deal with changing circumstances is just to keep a line of communication open with our financial aid office and with SAFA. We are here to help you, and we will do everything that we can to make sure that results are fair. Just make sure you communicate with us. How do you get the money? You'll get emails from SAFA for both the Faculty of Law bursary and for the general UVic bursary regarding the bursary awards. There will be instructions in those emails telling you how to accept the awards. So you do need to accept the awards according to the instructions. Frequently, I will get emails late in the term saying that several students did not accept their awards. So if you get one, accept it. Once the money's been accepted and applied to your tuition and outstanding fees, you may request a check for the remainder of the funds. We have students sometimes who ask us if they can get the money up front and then pay their tuition out of a different fund, and that's not possible. It has to, your tuition needs to be paid off first. If you have any other financial related questions or any difficulty with the process, please come see me. I'm also really happy to help talk through your budget or talk through a situation, a financial situation that you may need help with. We may be able to do something to help, so it is always a good idea to come by and see if we can do that. And once again, there is my contact information. I look forward to working with you.